Okay, so this is going to be a tutorial. It's going to be pretty short in the Unity game engine. This is pretty much a universal generic tutorial for this because it will work on iOS and it'll work for your PC-based stuff. It's something that I put together after researching Google and helped with people in the forums for basically my vehicles making brake lights turn on when I hit on the iPhone, when I hit my brake button texture on the screen, the brake lights would come on, and on the PC, when you hit the spacebar, brake lights would come on, and the vehicle brakes. So this is a pretty simple, small script, easy solution that worked pretty good, turning brake lights on and off, and it works really well on iOS. I was really impressed with what it added to an iPhone game or an iPad game when you saw the little brake lights came on. It was like a little small bit of polish that could have been overlooked, and it runs good performance-wise. So normally you would build your vehicle in your 3D app and have your chassis and your wheels and everything done nicely in your app, but these are literally all Unity cubes and cylinders and all of that. So when I'm going to create our little brake light pieces of geometry for it, I'm going to create them right here in Unity, but ideally you would have, around the body of your car where your brake lights are, had a little bit of geometry coming off of the body, like a decal floating, that you would use an alpha texture on it with some transparency and of course tinted red, and it would kind of overlay the geometry of the car. But I'm going to do that overlay here manually inside of Unity. I'm going to go game object, create other, and create a plane. I don't suggest this for iOS because a simple flat plane is about 50 quads or something like that. I don't know, maybe 100. I can't really tell what that is. PC, I'm sure this is fine if you just want to be lazy and brake lights like this. PC can run trillions and billions of polygons a second, right? So Control D. I'm going to switch over here to textured wireframe. And I have a right one and a left one. And also in your 3D app, I'm going to call this right brake light, you would probably have the brake geometry. You can have them as one single like combined object. They don't have to be two separate ones like this, but I don't have anything implemented right now to do combining of geometry in the Unity editor, so they're separate. We have our right brake light and our left brake light. Now, by default, when you create primitives, it puts a mesh collider on it. Now, this is going to create all kind of issues, so you want to pull those off. And basically, there they are. Now, we want to go over to materials, and I already, you can go right mouse button, create material, and I already created a material. I actually used particles additive. You can use anything under transparent, cut out, soft edge, unlit, diffuse, whatever. That's just the one I picked because the texture I'm using is just a black and white texture, so I needed an additive shader, which the particle additive is, and it treats the black and white texture like alpha. And I found you can just tint it red right here with the, these properties, and it's kind of cool, and it works all right. So I'm going to left mouse drag this over onto the brake lights, both of them. And I'm going to go back into textured mode, and we'll take a look. And sure enough, man, it's, I don't know what that factor does, but it's glowing. I can kind of make them dim and really solid with this. It's kind of neat. Some of these particle shaders. You wouldn't think to use a shader like that for something like this, but if you just experiment around in Unity, you discover neat things. So basically, if I drive away now, my brake lights stay put. Well, there's the group from a car, and they're not part of that group, so one of these things is not like the others. Two of these. So I'm just going to left mouse drag them into the chassis. Hit play, and we're good to go. They follow the car. And this vehicle, I don't know if I mentioned it or not. Maybe I did when I started out. I have a video tutorial in here creating a drivable vehicle in Unity, and that's where this little vehicle comes from. So basically now at this point we need to script these to turn on and off because they're just on all the time now. And oh, well, this is from when I was actually practicing the tutorial, so let me get rid of that and we'll start fresh. So we need to be able to turn them on and off. We don't want them all the time. That's not going to work. So we're going to go into the scripts folder. You can create a scripts folder if you don't have one. Right mouse button, create, and JavaScript. And we'll call this break enabler. And let's be very specific so I can remember. Break light enabler. I'll save. And then I'm going to go back. I'm going to hit this little edit button. And there's that function update. In my GUI texture scaling for Retina 1, I described function update, I described function start and custom functions. Basically, it's a default Unity function, which is something that basically initializes a set of instructions to happen. It says, hey, start doing this, what you tell it to do. Function update actually happens every second, every frame, constantly as your game's running. So physics calculations like the wheel colliders on these wheels on the vehicle, the box collider on it, and everything, that's all in function update. Those things that happen with that, or would happen with it, because they're processed every single frame every second. And things like touching a screen input and the input of touching a key on a keyboard, which is what we're going to actually use today. That's function update. Function start is another function, kind of a built-in Unity function here, and this basically says, hey, before any frames start happening, any of this gameplay jazz starts going off, do this first. So these are some things where like you can say, hey, this is what's enabled first, you know, this is a property of this right off the bat, and then you can go down and update, and on a per frame per second based on changes, you can manipulate these things that were set in function start. So to start with, we need to tell this script a couple of things, and we need to tell it, for you, if you have your brake lights as one piece of geometry, you just have one variable in here, but since I have two objects, I need to tell this script I need to tell it that these two separate objects exist. So basically, public variable is var, and by public I mean that when we type this and save it, it's going to actually create an open slot over here. Let's go over here. It's going to create an open slot like this material, physics material. That's a slot where you can basically apply and drag things into there. So in this script, we need to tell it, hey, we need to be able to tell it the left brake light, and with a colon there, and we'll just say it's a game object, you know, like a Unity generic game object. And I'm going to hit Control-C, Control-V, paste it, and we'll make this one right brake light, and it's also just like a generic game object. So now you're going to see what I was talking about with those slots here. And let me minimize some of this chunk. And actually we need to go and drag the script on over to the truck. Basically right on the top node in the hierarchy of the truck, the main body of it, where all the other scripts are on. And you'll see these two slots now. Left brake light, none game object. It's basically saying, hey, you haven't plugged anything in here, you haven't told me, the script, like what this object is yet. It just has this annotation here, which we typed out. Unity puts nice capitalization and spacing in there automatically. The editor does that awesome automatically. We don't put any spaces up in here in the script, but it spaces it out beautiful. And you can see that I described it well, and I know I'm looking for a left brake light. So we can go up here inside of our chassis object and say, oh, there's the left brake light. Let's left mouse drag it onto that, and then we'll left mouse drag the right brake light. And now, for our script, I'm going to save it. It knows that, hey, the left brake light var, or variable, is assigned that actual physical piece of geometry over there. So it knows exactly what it's messing with for later instructions. And that basically was the goal right there. So we plug those in. They're assigned. They're good to go. The script can now work with them, tweak them, do weird things to them. and all that jazz. So now the next thing we want to do is we want to say, all right, we need a couple of properties here before anyone's hitting spacebar and hitting brakes and racing and driving crazy and accelerating. Hey, we need to do a few things first. It's like the mother enforcing the rules or something. So basically what we want to do now is we're going to mess with the component of these two guys here, these pieces of geometry. They have all these components on them: mesh filter, they have a material, and they have a mesh renderer. Mesh renderer is where we come up with this trick to turn it on and off, and this is it right there. And you can see, hey, you know, if I could stand here during the game and press these switches like this, I could turn these on and off and make it look like brake lights are going on and off. But it's important that we have this property on the object that is called MeshRenderer, because we can use renderer, which is just a second part of it, in the script and turn it on and off. Enable, disable. Enable, disable, or set it true to false. True or false. So in function start, we don't want the brake lights on like they are right now when you start the game. You know, we start it up and they're just on. No matter if I drive, hit the brakes, or anything, it's like constantly hitting the brakes, unrealistic. So we want to say, hey, with these two guys right here, and I'm going to literally copy this, and I'm going to copy that brake light. Maybe I'm making the carpal tunnel worse, I don't know. I want to say, hey, with these two objects, I'm going to put dot renderer dot enabled equals, and I want to say false. And we're going to say that's not true. It's not enabled. It's off. So basically, it's going, all right, the left brake light thing object, which is declared right here. Hey, it's renderer enabled. Is not true. It's false. So it's basically telling you, hey, it's going to be off. You know, it's not going to be working. So on the bottom one, we want to do that with the right brake light too. And we'll set it to false. So basically right now, you'll see how function start works. We're telling it, hey, before we even get into the update, playing the game, turn these two guys off, both of them. And so when I hit play, and we get in here, you'll see something neat. They're not on, but you'll also notice that I can turn it on while we're running, but it's off. They're both off. The script literally ran function start, and it turned both of them off at start. So now what we have to do is we have to go into function update and say, all right, well, we need to be able to turn these on, but it's like, how are we going to do that? You know, we know what the objects are, but how are we going to control that? Like, we need to hit a key on the keyboard, right? Like, and generally, it's going to be the same key that's in our script that drives the truck. That will be the key that causes the brakes to come on, which just so happens to be spacebar. So in function update, we need to actually ask some questions and say, hey, if input dot get key down, and then we'll say key code dot space. Ooh, I can't type tonight. And so we'll stop and look at that real quick. This if input get key down key code space. Now there's other options of input on the keyboard in Unity that will work for getting the key press on the with the spacebar. You can use like input get button down and assign that button in the edit project input. And there's all kind of like the jump right now is assigned to joystick button 3, but I believe you could assign it to spacebar and make that your jump button and all that jazz. But for us right here, we're using input get key down. So we're actually using a hardwired built-in Unity setting that says, hey, this is a key on a keyboard, a specific US40 keyboard. And we're saying the code for the key on that keyboard is space. This is Unity's hardwired coding. That's, you know, in the editor it says, we know this is the spacebar key on the keyboard. So that's why we use this. It's hardwired to it. You can Google Unity key code or Unity key code space like it's written here. Google that, look it up, and there's a list of all the hardwired keys on the keyboard that Unity knows. And they would get typed right here. You can go look at that list, like if you want your brakes to be the S key or something, like the down key, down arrow. That's a hardwired mapped key too, and you could put it in here where space is, but we're going to use the space bar. So basically, we're asking this question every frame, function update, every second, every frame. Hey, do we have a key down? And is it the space bar? Do we have the space bar key down? And if we do, because we have the if there, it's saying, I'm going to actually put a tab in front of it, kind of space it out. If we do, then I'm going to go up here and copy this, because this is a thing at start that was disabling our brake lights. So I'm saying, maybe if spacebar key is down, I want to enable it. So I'm going to say, hey, that same object, left brake light, that's that same variable up here, renderer enabled. And if the keyboard key spacebar is pressed down, which car's braking probably, then this render is enabled true. So we're basically turning it on, which is very cool. Missed a couple things here. So important little brackets. Okay, so we need this because we're asking the if, and then this is what we want the function to do in here. So we got to put a curly bracket in front of it. And we also want it to do the other one too. So we're doing a lot of copy and pasting. Man, I'm rough tonight with this. I'm not working quick. And we'll set it to true. So here we go. And then we want to curly bracket out of that. Because inside of these curly brackets is where we're actually doing the thing that we need to do, which is the way that functions work. Whatever the action is going to happen inside of these guys. And our action is, hey, the render is enabled. It's true on that brake light on the right and left, both of them. They're going to turn on if the key down is the space bar. So now we need to say, hey, what's going to happen if the space bar is not pressed down, you know? We have to have a case for that. So we're going to say if else, like, is there another possible outcome that could happen here? And we're actually going to steal that. And we're going to indent it over two to make it nice and neat. I'm going to put a space just for educational purposes. So the other, we're asking up here, is the spacebar key down? So else would be like, well, what else is happening? If that spacebar is not down, then what else is going on? And it would be, well, the input would be get key up. Hey, the spacebar key is up. It's not being pressed down. So we have a case now for, well, if the spacebar key is, let me copy this stuff. If the spacebar key is not pressed down, then this is going to be our case for what would happen. Let me move these curly brackets over. If it isn't, and we're going to say, all right, well, if the spacebar key is not pressed down, don't enable this renderer, the mesh renderer on it. I'm going to hit Control S and remove some of these nasty spaces. Lots of little closing in and out brackets. I'm going to put some more spaces here. Function start, open bracket, says, hey, this is what the function is going to start doing, and it's going to do all this turning the renderers off on the brake lights. Closes it out, end of that instruction. Function update, let's open this entire, all of this, kind of have some nested little actions going on in here. This is the beginning for function update bracket, and this is actually the last one. These other little brackets, in here, are little actions going on inside of the function on the if-else conditions inside of the brackets and inside of these two brackets. This last bracket belongs up here, belongs with this guy. So if that makes sense. So I'm hitting Control S, saving it. I'm going to go back up on the chassis. I'm going to make sure everything's kosher with that. We're going to look and make sure left and right brake light are applied. Everything looks good in the script. No errors. I'm going to hit play. The mesh render on the truck's cool, even though the script's applied to it. because we only plugged in these two things that we want the mesh renderer to be impacted by. And you'll notice mesh renderer is unchecked. Now, when it runs this function start and it makes them both false, they are both false or otherwise unchecked. It's a Boolean, but we can talk about that in another tutorial. So basically, well, let's test its functionality. So I'm driving around, I hit spacebar. What do you know? Mesh renderer for both of those bad boys is on. Sorry about that. So yeah, brake lights work. Car brakes, brake lights come on. It's efficient. It works. And you can look at my other tutorials other tutorial for creating the drivable vehicle in Unity, and basically between these two you have your brake lights going. You can set these for reverse too, like if you're using the WADS keys for forward, left, and right. If your S key is a reverse, you can set that to basically enable, zoom back in here, a couple other little, like you'd have these smaller little reverse lights. So like you could set in your script here other little actions in the function for, hey, if input get key down, key code S, enable left reverse light or something. You know, just follow the same methodology here, and basically an unlimited amount of keys and an unlimited amount of lights and things that you could turn on and off depending on what key you're pressing. Can also set that up for switches, like if you want to turn a light switch on in a room or whatever and enable the glow from the light and all that. You can set it to where it just stays on. It doesn't have to be like just the key going down once and then when you let up it turns off. It could just stay on and then you'd hit the key again to turn it off. But we could go into that in a different tutorial. So hopefully this helps you guys kind of enable some kind of lights on your cars or brake lights. So hopefully it was educational, and until next time.